Okay, so the first part of today, we are just going to look at what's a ratio, what's a proportion, what does that look like, how do you write that, and then we're going to look at finding equivalent ratios. Okay, so give me a thumbs up if you're ready to go. You have everything you need. Notebook, pencil, calculator in front of you. All right. So let's keep going here. Okay, a little bit of vocab I want you to write down. Okay, so the first word here, let me get my pen working. My computer has been really slow this morning, so hopefully it will cooperate. Okay, so a ratio, and I want you to write this in your notes. A ratio is a comparison of two quantities by division. Okay, I'll give you a second to write that down. A comparison of two quantities by division. Okay, and now when we say it's a comparison of two quantities by division, ratio can be written in a few different ways. And sometimes if we're comparing things, like we can compare the number of boys to girls, okay? And maybe the ratio is 4 to 5. You could write it as 4 to 5. That's one way of writing it, okay? 4 girls to 5 boys, okay? Or you could write it 4 colon 5, the ratio of girls to boys is 4 to 5. Okay, we still say it the same way. The third way to write it is as a fraction. And this is going to be how we write it the most. Okay, the fraction is the easiest way to work with in math. So we're going to write all of our ratios as fractions. Okay, the second part of this is equivalent ratios. So ratios that make the same comparison. Although they may look a little bit different, they are still the same comparison. So I'll give you a second to write that in your notes. Equivalent ratios are ratios that make the same comparison. Okay, so an example of that, if I start with the ratio of 4 to 5, okay, an equivalent ratio could be 8 to 10. Those are equal. Okay. I might say an equivalent ratio is 12 to 15. Those are equal. Okay, so part of what you're going to have to do on your homework tonight is to write equivalent ratios. Okay, so that looks like this. I'm going to give you a ratio, and you are going to write an equivalent ratio. Okay, in order to do that, in order to write an equivalent ratio, you're going to multiply or divide. Multiply or divide both the top and bottom by the same amount. Okay, so when we're finding equivalent ratios, we're multiplying or dividing. Okay, you're going to multiply both the top and the bottom by the same amount. So if I start with the ratio 6 to 9, I can multiply both 6 and 9 by something. And you can multiply by anything, it doesn't matter. Okay, I would pick easy numbers. I could multiply, except for 1, because then it stays exactly the same. But you could multiply both the top and the bottom by 2. 6 times 2 is 12, and 9 times 2 is 18. So that is one equivalent ratio, 12 to 18. Okay, you could take 6 over 9 and you could multiply each one by 5. So you'd have 30 over 45. Okay. I also said you could divide. So we could take 6 over 9 and we could divide both the top and the bottom by 3 in this case. So that'd be 2 over 3. Okay, so you can multiply or divide. Now, if you divide, it has to come out to nice numbers. There can't be decimals. We want nice whole numbers. Okay. Questions there? Okay, so we could do 51 to 36. 51 to 36, we could multiply each one by 2 to get an equivalent ratio. 51 times 2 is 102. 36 times 2 is 72. So that's one equivalent ratio. Okay. We could take 51 to 36 and divide by 3. Okay, 51 divided by 3 is 17. 36 divided by 3 is 12. So you could have the ratio of 17 to 12. Questions there? Okay, so I want you to do the same thing on this one. And I want you to give me 2 equivalent ratios and just type them in the chat. 2 ratios equivalent to 9 to 27. And go ahead and type them in the chat. And you can write them in your notebook first. You can do the work in your notebook. Or try to get at least one. Here's some of the ones that I'm seeing so far. 3 to 9, 1 to 3, 18 to 54, 27 to 81, okay, so pretty quickly we were able to get 4 different ratios. On your homework, you're just gonna need to give me 2. Okay, so the way we got these, to get from 9 to 27 to 3 to 9, I think you just divided by 3. Okay, you could divide by 9 to get to 1 to 3. Some people multiplied by 2 to get 18 over 54, and multiplied by 3 to get 27 over 81. Okay, here's one more. 64 to 24. Find 2 ratios for that one. So I've got 128 over 48 works. 32 over 12 works. Somebody said 16 over 6. That would also work. Dividing by 4. So we had multiplying by 2, dividing by 2, dividing by 4. Okay, you could multiply by 10 if you wanted. Okay, I could have 640 over 240. That would be an equivalent ratio. Okay, questions on equivalent ratios? Any questions there? Okay, so the next part we're going to look at is a proportion. Okay, I want you to put this in your notes, proportion. And I'm not going to make you write down all of this. I'm going to tell you what you need to write down. So an equation states that two ratios are equivalent. Okay, equivalent just means they're equal, but they don't necessarily look the same. So I want you to write this in your notes. Ratios that are equivalent are said to be proportional. Okay, so take a minute, write that in your notes. Ratios that are equivalent are said to be proportional. Okay, and we have two ways that I'm going to show you to tell whether ratios are equivalent, okay? And if they're equivalent, then we say they form a proportion or a proportional. And the two ways that we're going to do this is we can either simplify the ratios or use what I call cross products. Ultimately, I don't care which one you use. I'll show you both. They both work. I'm going to tell you that one I think is a little quicker and easier than the other. Okay? But I'll show you how to do both of them. Okay. So, if I give you a set of ratios like 9 over 36 and 2 over 8. Okay? And you want to determine if they are proportional, if they form a proportion. If they do, that means they have to be equal, okay? Now, one way to do that, I'm going to do this first one by simplifying, is to simplify. So I want you to put this in your notes. Okay, I can take both of these ratios and simplify them. So 9 over 36. Okay, it's just a fraction that I'm going to simplify. I can divide those both by 9. And you get 1 over 4. Okay, and then I could take 2 over 8 and I can divide both of those by 2. And you get 1 over 4. And so because they both equal the same thing, they simplify to the same thing, we would say they are proportions. Oops, I gotta spell correctly. They are proportional. Okay, because they equal the same thing. Okay, so that's one way to do it, by simplifying. The other way that I'm going to show you over here is cross products. And here's where a calculator is going to come in handy. But I like this way because it works all the time and it's really quick. Okay, so we're going to take these two ratios, 9 over 12 and 16 over 24. Okay, and cross products is exactly what it sounds like. We're going to cross and multiply. So I'm going to take 12 times 16, which is 192, and 24 times 9, which is 216. Now, if the cross products are equal, then it's proportional. If they're not equal, then it's not proportional. So in this case, we get two completely different numbers, so it's not a proportion. Okay? And it would have worked to do cross products here also. I could have done 36 times 2 is 72. 8 times 9 is 72. Because they are equal, it was proportion. If the cross products are not equal, then it's not a proportion. Okay, and again, I don't care which method you use, whichever one you think is easier for you. I like cross products. I don't know about you guys. Okay, so let's look at this one. We'll start with one at a time. 3 over 27 and 2 over 18. I want you to type yes or no in the chat. Is that a proportion or not? Yes or no? Okay, and most everybody is saying, yes, that is a proportion. Okay, and if somebody asked me why, explain why that's a proportion, I would say, well, the cross products are equal. 27 times 2 is 54. 18 times 3 is also 54, so it works. Okay, the cross products are equal, so it's a proportion. Okay, how about this one? 12 to 15 and 27 to 36. Is that a proportion? Type yes or no in the chat. Okay, and this time I'm getting everybody saying no, they're not a proportion. 15 times 27, if I do the cross products, is 405. 36 times 12 is 432. So no, they are not. Questions there? Okay, and then the last thing is word problems. How many of you, does it stress you out as soon as I say word problems because those are going to be hard? I think for some of us, right? Word problems sometimes are tricky for some of us. But we're going to try to make this as simple as possible, okay? So when we look at a word problem, we are going to set up a ratio and compare them. Okay. So this first one, it says at 4 degrees Celsius, 4 cubic feet of silver has the same mass as 42 cubic feet of water. At the same temperature, would 210 cubic feet of water have the same mass as 20 cubic feet of silver? Okay, so when we are doing this type of problem, if we're looking at word problems, we need to first of all figure out what are we comparing. Okay, that is the first thing we need to ask ourselves. What is being compared? Can anybody tell me in this problem what is being compared? If I was going to set up a ratio, okay, I'm going to set up a fraction. What are the two things that we're comparing? Anybody know? Okay, and so when some people are putting numbers in the chat, I want words. What am I comparing in words? Okay, and some people are writing cubic feet, but we're actually comparing water and silver. Water and silver. And it doesn't matter what order I put them in. I could put silver over water or water over silver as long as I'm consistent. Okay? So at that point, I'm going to set up some ratios with numbers. Okay, I have 4 cubic feet of silver. So that means the 4 has to go on the bottom. Has the same mass as 42 cubic feet of water. 42 has to go on the top. Okay, my other set of numbers, 210 cubic feet of water. So 210 goes on the top. And 20 cubic feet of silver. My question then is, are those two ratios equal? Are they the same? And we can use cross products to tell that. Okay, so I would do 42 times 20, which is 840, and 4 times 210, which is also 840. So to answer the question, I would say yes, they are the same because the ratios are equivalent. Okay. Okay, let's look at one more. So Mrs. Elfring's first hour class has 14 girls and 16 boys. Her third hour class has 15 girls and 17 boys. Is there the same ratio of girls to boys in each class? Okay, so our first question, what are we comparing? What's being compared in this problem? In words, what are we comparing? So we are comparing boys and girls in each hour. Okay, so let's start with first hour. I put boys to girls. It wouldn't matter if you put girls over boys. Okay, you can do it either way. But because I put boys on top, I have to put 16 first. And then 14 girls on the bottom. So 16 over 14. Then we need to look at my third hour class. And there's 15 girls. So 15 goes on the bottom, 17 boys would go on the top. And we need to know if those are equivalent ratios. Okay, in order to tell if they're equivalent, we're going to do our cross products. We're going to do this. 14 times 17 is 238. And 15 times 16 is 240. So is there the same ratio of boys to girls in each class? We would say no. Okay, because they are not equivalent. Questions there?